In the ancient heart of Egypt, the land of the pharaohs, a storm was brewing. An unprecedented storm that would forever alter the course of its history. The power of the pharaohs, once unchallenged, was beginning to show cracks. The Second Intermediate Period, a time marked by strife, division, and the intrusion of foreign rulers, was a dark chapter in Egypt's long history. This was a period when the native Egyptian rulers could no longer hold their ground, and a foreign power, the Hyksos, began to assert their dominance. The Hyksos, a Semitic-speaking people, arrived in Egypt through the eastern delta, bringing with them new techniques of warfare, including the use of the chariot, an innovation that would forever change Egyptian military tactics. Their influence began to grow in the northern parts of Egypt, eventually establishing their capital at Avaris. They were not the first foreign invaders Egypt had faced, marked the beginning of a long and painful period for the once mighty nation. In the southern region of Egypt, the native rulers of Thebes, distant cousins of the pharaohs who had once ruled over all Egypt, began to stir in resistance. It was a time of uncertainty and tension, a time when hope was fading, and the future of Egypt seemed uncertain. But amid this despair, a new generation of leaders was emerging, and among them was a young queen whose influence would help reshape the destiny of Egypt. Her name was Ahmose-Nefertari, and she would become an emblem of resistance, power, and unity in the face of foreign domination. Ahmose-Nefertari was born into a royal family, the daughter of the noble Pharaoh Amenhotep I and his queen, Amenhotep. Her early life was one of privilege, but it was also marked by the looming presence of the Hyksos and their growing power. The land was divided, the people were oppressed, and Egypt's once unified civilization was on the brink of collapse. As a young woman, she would have been acutely aware of the situation. Her family, with their deep ties to the ancient traditions of the pharaohs, had long been committed to defending Egypt's sovereignty and restoring its rightful rulers to the throne. The fall of the Middle Kingdom had left the land fractured, a country divided by both internal conflict and the overwhelming force of foreign invaders. The Hyksos had made use of Egypt's internal divisions, manipulating power struggles to their advantage. But their hold on the land was far from secure, as the native Egyptians, especially those in the southern regions, continued to resist their rule. The heart of this resistance was located in Thebes, where Ahmose-Nefertari's family lived. Her father, Amenhotep I, was one of the leaders who had taken up the banner of rebellion against the Hyksos. However, this resistance came at great cost. The Egyptian royal house was embroiled in a deadly struggle, and Amenhotep I would eventually lose his life in battle, a martyr to the cause of freeing Egypt from the grip of the foreign rulers. Ahmose-Nefertari, though young, would not be one to let this tragedy defeat her. She stood by her family's side, her resolve hardening with every passing day. She had been groomed to be more than just a queen. She was to be a partner, a strategist, and a voice of hope for the Egyptian people. As the daughter of Amenhotep I, she understood the responsibility that came with her birthright. In this world of turmoil, Ahmose-Nefertari's role would soon become central, not only to her own family's fortunes but also to the future of Egypt itself. As fate would have it, her union with a young prince, Ahmose I, would set the stage for a future that would transform the nation. Ahmose I, the son of Amenhotep I, would take up his father's mantle and lead the charge against the Hyksos. However, his path to greatness would not be one he would walk alone. By his side was Ahmose-Nefertari, his queen, whose influence would prove indispensable. Together, Ahmose I and Ahmose-Nefertari would form a powerful partnership, one that would revive the ancient glory of Egypt and end the Hyksos occupation. Their shared vision for a free and united Egypt would guide them through the darkest moments of their struggle. Theirs was a story of love, loyalty, and the strength that comes from unwavering determination, a story that would echo through the annals of history. But before victory could be achieved, the seeds of rebellion had to be sown. The road to liberation would be long and treacherous, filled with political intrigue, military campaigns, and moments of heartbreaking loss. And it all began with a young queen, who refused to let the memory of her fallen father fade into history. Ahmose-Nefertari, the woman who would stand beside her king, would become the heart of a movement that would shape Egypt's destiny for centuries to come. Ahmose-Nefertari knew that time was running out. The longer the Hyksos remained entrenched in their northern strongholds, the harder it would become to reclaim Egypt. The prospect of a divided Egypt, forever under foreign rule, was a haunting thought. Yet, despite the uncertainty, the resistance movements in the south were gaining strength. The Theban royals, particularly Ahmose's father, Amenhotep I, were not content to merely live in the shadow of the Hyksos. They were determined to reclaim their land. This was not just a war for territory, but a war for Egypt's identity, its culture, and its sovereignty. Ahmose I, still a young prince, had witnessed firsthand the growing frustration and helplessness of his people. He had seen the Hyksos' foreign ways, their strange customs, and their undeniable military superiority, particularly their use of the chariot, which had revolutionized warfare. But for all their strength, the Hyksos lacked the unity that the native Egyptians still held deep within their hearts. This was a realization that would guide Ahmose I in the years to come. Egypt's greatest strength was its people, its culture, and its ancient traditions, which no foreign invader could ever truly understand or replicate. Yet, the battle ahead would not be won by ideology alone. Ahmose I understood that the path to victory would require cunning, perseverance, and above all, the support of his people. His marriage to Ahmose-Nefertari was not just a union of love and loyalty, it was a strategic alliance that would strengthen their cause. Nefertari, with her keen political mind and regal presence, was the perfect complement to his leadership. Together, they were not just a king and queen, they were the embodiment of Egypt's potential for renewal. Ahmose-Nefertari had been raised with an acute awareness of Egypt's deep traditions as well as the intricacies of its political landscape. She was not simply a passive observer in the court. She was an active participant in shaping the future. Her strength was not in physical might, but in her ability to inspire those around her, to offer wisdom, and to unify people toward a common purpose. Her role in the court of Thebes was crucial in maintaining morale during the years of occupation by the Hyksos. She knew that Ahmose I needed more than just military prowess. He needed a symbol of hope, a unifying force to rally the people. And Ahmose-Nefertari, with her noble bloodline and strong will, was the perfect person to provide that. Her influence over the people of Thebes was immense, and her presence at his side made it clear to all who saw them together that they were united in their cause. The royal couple's relationship would become one of the cornerstones of the Egyptian resistance, a powerful partnership between king and queen, warrior and strategist, bound not only by love but by a shared destiny. As Ahmose I began to organize his military campaigns, Ahmose-Nefertari played a pivotal role in shaping the strategy. Her insight into the political dynamics of Egypt allowed them to garner support from powerful local factions, securing alliances that would prove vital as the war intensified. The Hyksos had their hold on the northern cities, but the south, with Thebes at its heart, remained a bastion of Egyptian culture and pride. In the southern cities, she worked tirelessly to consolidate Egypt's remaining forces, urging the nobles to rally behind her husband. The unity of Egypt was at stake, and Ahmose-Nefertari was determined to see it restored. With the foundation of support growing, Ahmose I led a series of daring raids against the Hyksos-controlled territories. The war was brutal and the stakes were high. As much as Ahmose-Nefertari sought to protect Egypt's soul, Ahmose I was driven by the fierce desire to avenge his father's death, to honor his memory, and to reclaim what had been lost. The battlefields were filled with the clash of swords, the cries of warriors, and the relentless sounds of the chariots that had once seemed like a symbol of invincibility. Yet, despite the Hyksos' military superiority, they had underestimated the resolve of the Egyptian people and the strategic brilliance of their leaders. Ahmose-Nefertari's influence on Ahmose I was profound. She encouraged him during the darkest times, offering counsel and strength when the path seemed unclear. While he fought on the front lines, she worked behind the scenes, ensuring that his people remained united and that resources were carefully managed. Her role was not just ceremonial, it was essential to their success. In the face of overwhelming odds, it was her steady hand that helped guide Egypt through the turbulence of war. The first major victory for the Theban forces came when Ahmose I launched a surprise attack against a Hyksos stronghold along the eastern border. The battle was hard-fought, but it was a turning point, showing the Egyptians that they could not only resist but also defeat their oppressors. The battle of this early campaign cemented Ahmose I's reputation as a formidable military leader, but it was also a victory for Ahmose-Nefertari, whose careful diplomacy had ensured the loyalty of critical allies. Her name began to be spoken with reverence, not only as the queen of a warrior king but as the guiding force behind his rise. But the victory was bittersweet. Despite the growing momentum, the war was far from over. The Hyksos, determined not to lose their grip on Egypt, retaliated fiercely. And Ahmose I knew that their defeat would require more than just military skill. It would require a complete reshaping of Egyptian society. The challenge would not only be to defeat the Hyksos but to restore the fractured unity of Egypt. Ahmose-Nefertari's role was more critical than ever. She was a symbol of hope, not only for the soldiers fighting on the front lines but for the civilians who had lived in fear under Hyksos rule for so long. Her influence over the hearts and minds of the Egyptian people became a crucial factor in the growing resistance movement. The strength of Egypt's identity, forged in the fires of war and the spirit of its queen, would ultimately be the key to victory. In the days that followed, Ahmose I and Ahmose-Nefertari prepared for the final campaign, the Siege of Avaris, the heart of the Hyksos occupation. This would be their most decisive battle. Egypt's fate rested on their shoulders and they were ready to face it together. The sun that shone upon Egypt was no longer the bright, unyielding beacon of the Middle Kingdom. It was a pale reflection of the greatness that had once been, dimmed by the shadow of the Hyksos. The foreign rulers of Egypt's north had brought with them not only their military prowess but a wave of cultural and political change that threatened to undermine Egypt's soul. For the people of Thebes, the capital of the south, it was an era marked by both hope and fear, and within that crucible, Ahmose I was forged. Ahmose I, born the son of Amenhotep I and Ahmose-Nefertari, grew up in a time of great uncertainty. His father, the king of Thebes, had resisted the Hyksos occupation but had met a tragic end on the battlefield. His death was a brutal reminder of the stakes at play. Egypt's sovereignty was in peril, and the royal family was at the forefront of the struggle to reclaim it. As a child, Ahmose I was taught not only the arts of kingship but the art of war. His early years were filled with lessons in leadership, diplomacy, and combat, preparing him for the day when he would have to step into his father's shoes. He watched as the once great land of Egypt was reduced to fractured factions, with the Hyksos controlling the north while the southern kingdom of Thebes fought to maintain its independence. From a young age, Ahmose was aware of the dire situation his people faced. The Hyksos, though foreign invaders, had proven themselves to be formidable foes. They brought with them the chariot, a weapon that revolutionized warfare, and their military tactics had put the Egyptian armies on the defensive. But Ahmose I was not one to yield easily. He was determined to avenge his father's death and restore Egypt to its former glory. Ahmose-Nefertari, as his mother and queen, was not just a source of love and support for Ahmose I. She was his closest advisor, guiding him through the complexities of his early years. Even before the Hyksos invasion, she had been a powerful figure in the court of Thebes, respected for her wisdom, strength, and political acumen. She had been married to Ahmose I's father, Amenhotep I, and had been a key figure in his efforts to resist the Hyksos. When Amenhotep I fell in battle, it was Ahmose-Nefertari who ensured that the legacy of her husband would not be lost. She had prepared her son for the day when he would take his place as king, and under her tutelage, he grew into a wise and capable leader. The relationship between Ahmose-Nefertari and her son was one of mutual respect and deep affection. She recognized his potential early on, and as he matured, he came to rely on her counsel as much as on the guidance of his military commanders. Ahmose may first have been the king, but Ahmose-Nefertari's role in shaping his path was undeniable. She was not just a queen, but a queen mother, a woman who held the future of Egypt in her hands. With his mother's support, Ahmose I began to gather a force to challenge the Hyksos. He called upon the Theban soldiers, the last bastion of Egypt's military might, and began to form alliances with the other southern nobles who had remained loyal to Egypt's ancient rulers. It was a difficult task. Many were wary of challenging the Hyksos, who had established a stronghold in the northern cities, and Egypt's economy was in tatters after years of occupation. But Ahmose I's resolve was unwavering. He knew that without action, Egypt would be lost forever. His father's death had shown him the price of inaction. Ahmose-Nefertari played a central role in rallying the support of the southern factions. As a queen, she held the power to sway the nobility, and her influence over the court was immense. She understood that Ahmose I's campaign would not succeed without the support of the people, and so she traveled throughout Thebes speaking with the local leaders, assuring them that Egypt's glory could be restored if they stood united. Her words, steeped in both wisdom and passion, were a beacon of hope to those who had lost faith. Meanwhile, Ahmose I focused on training his forces and developing a strategy that could counter the might of the Hyksos. One of the most crucial elements of his plan was the creation of a formidable fighting force, one that could not only challenge the chariot warriors of the Hyksos but could also strike quickly and decisively. Ahmose I understood that Egypt's advantage lay not in sheer numbers, but in speed and the ability to surprise the enemy. The Theban forces under his leadership became more organized, disciplined, and lethal than ever before. The first military campaigns were small in scale, testing both the resolve of Ahmose I's men and the loyalty of his allies. The southern army began to push back against the Hyksos forces, launching raids on their supply lines and striking at their outlying garrisons. These skirmishes, though relatively minor in comparison to the full-scale battles to come, were significant. They sent a message to the Hyksos that the Egyptians were no longer content to live under their rule. The spirit of resistance was alive and well, and Ahmose I was its symbol. Ahmose-Nefertari's role in these early campaigns cannot be overstated. She was not just a passive observer, but an active participant in the war effort. She provided logistical support, helped secure provisions for the army, and continued to rally the Egyptian people to the cause. Her presence as both a queen and a mother was a powerful motivator for the soldiers who fought in her son's name. The sight of Ahmose-Nefertari at his side, unwavering in her commitment to the Egyptian cause, bolstered Ahmose I's confidence. Together, they forged an unbreakable bond, a bond that would be tested in the battles to come. As the resistance began to grow, so did the resolve of the Hyksos rulers. They could no longer ignore the threat posed by the Theban forces. The Hyksos king, Amenhotep I, understood that his control over Egypt was being seriously challenged. He would not allow the Egyptians to rise up without a fight. The stage was now set for a confrontation that would determine the fate of Egypt. In the years that followed, Ahmose I would continue to build upon the successes of his early campaigns. His forces would grow stronger, his tactics more refined, and his reputation as a military leader would spread throughout Egypt. But none of this would have been possible without the unwavering support of Ahmose-Nefertari, whose leadership, vision, and love for her people gave him the strength to continue the fight. The battle for Egypt's soul was about to enter its most crucial phase. The Hyksos had underestimated the Egyptians, believing them to be broken and divided. But with Ahmose I and Ahmose-Nefertari at the helm, Egypt's fight for freedom was only just beginning. Ahmose I's early battles, though small and seemingly inconsequential on the grand scale of Egypt's long history, were nevertheless significant milestones in the struggle to expel the Hyksos and restore Egypt to its rightful rulers. The very first taste of victory was crucial, for it solidified the belief that Egypt could indeed rise again despite the overwhelming power of the Hyksos. Ahmose I's leadership, shaped by his early training and guided by his mother's counsel, was proving effective. But this would be no simple war of attrition. It would be a war that demanded both vision and sacrifice. In the months that followed, Ahmose-Nefertari's role continued to evolve. She was more than just the queen. She had become a key political strategist, an invaluable voice in her son's court. As the son of Ahmose-Nefertari, Ahmose I carried the weight of a legacy that needed to be honored, and Ahmose-Nefertari's steadfast commitment to that legacy kept her son's path clear. Through her careful diplomacy, she helped to forge alliances with powerful southern factions, tribal leaders, military commanders, and even influential temple priests whose support was critical in the coming struggle. But war was a costly endeavor. The Egyptian army needed supplies, food, weapons, and resources to support its growing forces, and the pressure of these logistics weighed heavily on Ahmose I and his advisors. This was another area where Ahmose-Nefertari's influence was pivotal. She used her political acumen to maintain Egypt's supply lines, arranging for provisions from the rich agricultural lands of the Nile Delta. She was also involved in organizing the construction of military infrastructure, including fortifications that would protect Thebes from any potential retaliation by the Hyksos. Her ability to ensure stability in Egypt's southern heartland allowed Ahmose I to focus on his military campaigns without worrying about the threat of collapse at home. As Ahmose I's forces grew, so did the complexity of the military campaigns. By now, his early victories had spread a glimmer of hope among the Egyptian people. Those who had once been skeptical of a rebellion against the Hyksos were now more inclined to lend their support. The unity that had been shattered by foreign invaders was slowly being restored, but it was still a fragile thing, and it required careful nurturing. Every victory, every new ally won, brought Egypt closer to its goal. Yet, the ultimate challenge still loomed. The Hyksos capital at Avaris was well fortified, and its fall would require a battle of unprecedented scale. Ahmose-Nefertari continued to work behind the scenes to ensure her son's success. She strengthened her alliances with the high priests of Ammonius, whose influence over the Egyptian people was immeasurable. The gods of Egypt were a constant reminder to the people of the divine right of their rulers, and Ahmose-Nefertari understood the importance of religious support. She ensured that the temples of Thebes were restored, their rituals conducted with great pomp and ceremony, so that the gods would smile upon the Egyptian cause. In her capacity as queen, Ahmose-Nefertari also played a key role in diplomacy, both within Egypt and with neighboring kingdoms. She sent emissaries to other states, seeking support in their fight against the Hyksos. She even sent messages to the land of Kush, asking for military assistance. While Egypt's northern borders were occupied by the Hyksos, the southern borders were more secure, and the possibility of building a coalition with neighboring kingdoms provided much-needed security for the Theban resistance. However, her efforts were not without their challenges. The Hyksos, though foreign invaders, had long maintained trade relations with Egypt and had secured a foothold in the country's economy. Many of the southern Egyptians were hesitant to fully commit to a war of liberation, fearing that the repercussions could be disastrous. Ahmose-Nefertari worked tirelessly to change their minds, reminding them of their cultural heritage and the importance of reclaiming Egypt's throne. Her speeches, her presence, and her tireless efforts played a crucial role in inspiring those who had been wary of the war to lend their support. Ahmose I, for his part, was proving himself as a leader who could both inspire loyalty and strike fear into his enemies. His reputation as a tactician was growing, and the Egyptian army began to adopt new strategies that utilized the terrain of Egypt to their advantage. His forces, although smaller than the Hyksos, were quick, mobile, and disciplined, qualities that allowed them to carry out ambushes and raids on the Hyksos supply lines, disrupting their supply chains and weakening their grip on Egypt. The tensions between the two sides grew. The Hyksos, led by their king Apophis, had underestimated the resilience of the Egyptians. At first, they believed that their military superiority, their chariotry, and their fortified cities would keep them safe. But as the years passed, their position began to erode. Ahmose I's strategy was simple yet effective: wear down the Hyksos over time, forcing them to fight on multiple fronts and reducing their ability to respond quickly. His forces slowly gained the upper hand. Ahmose-Nefertari remained a constant source of strength for her son. Her wisdom was reflected in her advice, and her tireless work behind the scenes was essential to the success of Egypt's military campaigns. She had become more than just the wife of the king. She was a mother, a strategist, and a queen in every sense of the word. As the Theban forces grew stronger and their victories more numerous, it became clear that the tide of war was shifting in their favor. By the time Ahmose I and his forces reached the walls of Avaris, the city that had once been the heart of the Hyksos occupation, the fate of Egypt seemed sealed. But they were not yet victorious. The Hyksos, realizing that their grip on Egypt was slipping, would not yield easily. The siege of Avaris would be the final and most difficult challenge yet, and it would be in the heat of this final struggle that Ahmose I and Ahmose-Nefertari's partnership would truly be tested. The story of Ahmose I and Ahmose-Nefertari was not merely one of ambition, strategy, and military success. It was also rooted in a legacy of sacrifice. For Ahmose I, the death of his father, Seqenenretau, was the moment that crystallized his determination to rid Egypt of the Hyksos and restore the glory of the pharaohs. This tragic event not only defined his path as a ruler but also shaped his relationship with his mother, Ahmose-Nefertari. who became both his guiding force and his anchor as he navigated the turbulent waters of war and leadership. Seqenenre was no ordinary king. His reign marked a pivotal period in Egypt's struggle against the Hyksos, who had occupied the northern regions of the country. A warrior at heart, Seqenenre had fought valiantly against the Hyksos forces, but his death came in the most brutal of circumstances. In the early years of the rebellion, he had led a series of campaigns aimed at expelling the Hyksos from Egypt. Yet, his final moments were not to be glorious ones on the battlefield. The historical evidence suggests that he died in battle, likely at the hands of the Hyksos, who had captured and executed him. The circumstances of his death are still a subject of much debate among historians. Some suggest that Seqenenre may have been killed in a skirmish or ambush while preparing for a larger campaign, while others believe that he was executed in a more personal, ritualistic manner. What is certain is that his death left a deep scar on Egypt, particularly within the royal family. Ahmose I, his son, was left to pick up the pieces of his father's shattered dream of liberation. The young prince, still in the early stages of his military career, was now faced with the monumental task of continuing his father's war, not only for the freedom of Egypt but also for the honor of his family. Ahmose-Nefertari, as queen and mother, was equally devastated by the loss. Seqenenre had been her partner in both life and struggle, and his death left a profound void in her heart. Yet, instead of succumbing to grief, Ahmose-Nefertari used her sorrow as a catalyst for action. She knew that her son, Ahmose I, was now the sole heir to the throne and that the fate of Egypt rested on his shoulders. The loss of her husband meant that she would have to be both a mother and a mentor to Ahmose I, helping him navigate the complexities of leadership and military strategy. Her wisdom and strength became more important than ever. She worked tirelessly to ensure that the vision of her late husband was not forgotten. Together with Ahmose I, she began to build a coalition of loyal supporters who were committed to continuing the fight against the Hyksos. The Theban soldiers who had followed her husband into battle now pledged their loyalty to his son. But loyalty alone would not win the war. Ahmose-Nefertari knew that she needed to help her son cultivate the political and military skills that would enable him to defeat the Hyksos once and for all. Ahmose I, still young and untested in the full scope of kingship, leaned heavily on his mother for guidance. She was his rock, providing him with the strength and perspective needed to overcome the challenges of leadership. Ahmose-Nefertari was not just a mother, she was a queen who understood the gravity of her role. She encouraged her son to take up the mantle of leadership with honor and resolve, but she also reminded him that their path would not be easy. The war was not just about reclaiming Egypt, it was about restoring the divine order that had been shattered by foreign invaders. Ahmose I's character was deeply shaped by his mother's teachings. He learned not just how to wield a sword, but how to wield power with wisdom. As he prepared to take his father's place on the battlefield, he understood that his actions would reverberate through the history of Egypt. His father's death, painful as it was, had given him a sense of urgency. The longer the Hyksos remained in power, the more entrenched their rule would become. The people of Egypt had suffered enough under their foreign rulers, and Ahmose I was determined to see them freed. Ahmose-Nefertari also recognized that the military campaign would require more than just bloodshed, it would require diplomacy and careful alliances. She knew that Egypt could not defeat the Hyksos without the support of the powerful southern and eastern territories. As the mother of the king, she leveraged her influence to gather allies. She secured promises from neighboring regions and influential temples, including the high priests of Ammonius in Thebes, whose loyalty was critical to ensuring the support of the people. It was during these formative years that Ahmose I came to see the importance of unity. Though his father had fought valiantly, his campaign had been fractured by internal divisions. Ahmose I, under his mother's guidance, understood that to defeat the Hyksos, Egypt would need to be united in purpose. He worked to unite the fragmented Egyptian forces under a single banner, drawing not only from the soldiers of Thebes but from all parts of the country. This effort would ultimately prove successful as the Egyptian forces began to coalesce into a single, formidable army. As Ahmose I prepared to take his father's place on the battlefield, the memory of Seqenenre loomed large. The young prince was haunted by the image of his father's brutal death. But this was not a burden he carried alone. Ahmose-Nefertari was there at his side, reminding him that his father's death was not in vain. Her words were a constant source of strength. "The gods have chosen you, my son. The gods have chosen us all. This is our time to rise again." In the years that followed, Ahmose I's military campaigns would grow in scale and intensity. But his greatest victory, the one that would ultimately lead to the expulsion of the Hyksos from Egypt, was still years away. The siege of Avaris, the Hyksos capital, would be the ultimate test of his leadership and of the legacy of his father and mother. But the death of Amenhotep I had set the stage for that moment. And it was under the guidance of Ahmose-Nefertari that Ahmose I was able to rise to his destiny. With the death of his father and the overwhelming burden of reclaiming Egypt's sovereignty, Ahmose I emerged not just as a son bent on avenging his father's death, but as a king who understood that the path to victory would not be simple. The Hyksos, despite their foreign origins, had established a formidable rule over Egypt's northern territories, and they were deeply entrenched in their power. The challenges before Ahmose I were immense. The military might of the Hyksos, the fractured nature of Egypt's forces, and the persistent threat of betrayal from within. Yet, despite these obstacles, Ahmose I was determined to face the Hyksos head-on. And the first steps of his campaign would lay the foundation for Egypt's ultimate liberation. Ahmose-Nefertari remained a constant force at her son's side. Her wisdom, experience, and ability to inspire loyalty in both the court and the military played a crucial role in preparing the kingdom for war. Though she was not a warrior herself, her presence and counsel provided Ahmose I with the clarity he needed to make difficult decisions. Together, they devised a plan to systematically weaken the Hyksos' control over Egypt, striking at their supply lines, weakening their military presence, and sowing discord in their ranks. The first major campaign under Ahmose I's command was a series of small, strategic raids on Hyksos territories. Ahmose I understood that he could not immediately engage in a full-scale battle with the Hyksos. His forces were still too small. They served to remind the Hyksos that Egypt had not forgotten its past glory and that the people of Thebes would no longer be subdued. Ahmose-Nefertari's diplomatic efforts helped ensure that these early campaigns were supported by the neighboring regions and the temples of Ammonius, whose spiritual and political influence provided crucial backing. During these early campaigns, Ahmose I's forces grew more confident. They attacked key Hyksos strongholds along the borders and conducted hit-and-run tactics that made it difficult for the Hyksos to anticipate where the Egyptians would strike next. The chariotry of the Hyksos, which had been one of their greatest strengths, was rendered less effective in these swift, unpredictable skirmishes. Ahmose I, knowing that the element of surprise was key to their success, employed guerrilla tactics and reinforced his troops with elite soldiers trained in speed and precision. These forces, known as the Theban reserves, became the backbone of his army. Ahmose-Nefertari's role during these early campaigns was indispensable. While her son commanded the forces, she worked tirelessly behind the scenes to maintain the stability of Thebes and the southern territories. She kept the supply routes open, ensured that the people of Egypt were united behind the cause, and sent emissaries to the powerful regional leaders to secure their support. She also continued to work closely with the priests of Ammonius, whose religious support was crucial to keeping morale high among the people. One of the key victories of this early period was the Battle of Jarukasi. Although it was not a decisive victory in terms of military size, it was a symbolic one. The Hyksos had expected an easy victory against what they saw as a ragtag band of rebels from the south. But Ahmose I, with his tactical genius and the support of his mother, was able to break through the Hyksos defenses, forcing them to retreat. It was a small but important victory that sent a clear message to the Hyksos: Egypt was no longer passive, and the fight for freedom had begun. Ahmose I's forces began to grow in strength and number, and so did his confidence. By now he had earned the respect of his soldiers, who saw him not only as a king but as a warrior who led from the front. Ahmose-Nefertari's influence continued to shape his decisions. She reminded him time and again that the struggle was not only for vengeance but for the future of Egypt and its people. Every victory, no matter how small, was a step toward Egypt's ultimate liberation. It was during this time that Ahmose I began to see the Hyksos not as an overwhelming military power but as an empire full of weaknesses that could be exploited. Their hold on Egypt was based not only on military might but on the division of the country's people. The Hyksos had created alliances with some Egyptian nobles, but they had also alienated many others, and these divisions could be turned against them. Ahmose I, with Ahmose-Nefertari's counsel, began to make moves to break those alliances. One of the more subtle aspects of the early campaigns was Ahmose I's efforts to weaken the Hyksos politically. He sent covert messages to some of the nobles who had been collaborating with the Hyksos, offering them better terms should they abandon the invaders. These political maneuvers were just as important as the military campaigns, for they played into the larger strategy of isolating the Hyksos and making it more difficult for them to maintain control over Egypt. As the raids and skirmishes continued, the Hyksos found themselves increasingly stretched thin. Their fortifications were being overrun, their supply lines disrupted, and their political influence waning. The Egyptians, emboldened by their successes, began to look toward a more decisive victory. Ahmose I knew that the time had come to begin the final push, the siege of Avaris, the Hyksos capital. But before that, he would need to ensure that his forces were ready for the challenges that lay ahead. The battle for Avaris would not be a simple siege, it would be a war of attrition, a test of strength, endurance, and resolve. And in that moment, Ahmose-Nefertari's influence would again play a crucial role. She was the steady hand that guided her son through the strategic complexities of the war, reminding him of the greater vision that they were all working toward, the restoration of Egypt and the defeat of foreign invaders. The early campaigns had built momentum for the Egyptians, but the true test was yet to come. The Hyksos were now on the defensive, but they were not yet defeated. Avaris, the heart of their power, still stood. The Egyptians were poised for their greatest challenge. And in the lead-up to that final siege, Ahmose I and Ahmose-Nefertari were more determined than ever to see Egypt restored. The day had come. After years of skirmishes, raids, and political maneuvering, the time had arrived for the final confrontation. Avaris, the great capital of the Hyksos, stood as a symbol of foreign dominance over Egypt, a symbol that would soon be shattered. The Hyksos, though pushed back by Ahmose I's relentless campaigns, still clung to their stronghold with defiance, believing that their fortifications and their military might would protect them from the Egyptians' wrath. But Ahmose I, with his brilliant strategies and the unshakable support of his mother, Ahmose-Nefertari, was determined to end their rule once and for all. Ahmose-Nefertari, who had been instrumental in guiding her son's path through the many stages of the conflict, knew that the siege would be the defining moment of their lives. She had witnessed the sacrifices, the victories, and the losses that had brought them to this point. Now she watched as her son prepared to lead his forces in the final assault on the Hyksos capital, the heart of their empire. The walls of Avaris had withstood many battles before, but they were about to face an army that was more determined, more united, and more battle-hardened than ever. The siege of Avaris began with the customary strategies of siege warfare. Ahmose I, however, understood that simply surrounding the city and waiting for starvation to weaken the defenders would not be enough. The Hyksos had lived within the walls of Avaris for years, and their resources were substantial. A direct assault would be costly, and the Egyptians could ill afford to waste soldiers on a prolonged battle. Thus, Ahmose I chose a more cunning approach. He would weaken the Hyksos both militarily and psychologically, using the same guerrilla tactics that had served him well in the early campaigns. Ahmose-Nefertari, ever the strategist, worked tirelessly behind the scenes to ensure the success of her son's plan. She continued to build alliances, not only within Egypt but also with neighboring kingdoms that had long watched the Egyptian struggle with interest. Her diplomatic efforts were crucial in ensuring that Egypt had the resources and the support it needed for the final push. She knew that this battle was about more than just military might. It was a matter of rallying the Egyptian spirit and ensuring that all corners of the land stood united behind their king. As the siege tightened around Avaris, Ahmose I ordered a series of covert attacks on the city's outer defenses. These attacks were designed not to breach the walls but to wear down the defenders, forcing them to spread their forces thin. At night, Egyptian scouts would infiltrate the city's outer ring of defenses, cutting off supply lines and setting traps that would disrupt the Hyksos' ability to mount an effective defense. Meanwhile, the Egyptian army made their presence felt by launching small raids against Hyksos outposts, sowing fear and uncertainty among the defenders within. The psychological warfare was just as critical as the physical one. Ahmose I, with his mother's counsel, understood that the Hyksos were not just invaders, they were occupiers. And the Egyptian people had lived under their rule for too long. The siege became a symbol of Egypt's resistance, and each victory, no matter how small, further undermined the Hyksos' confidence. As news of the Egyptian success in surrounding Avaris spread throughout Egypt, the people rallied behind their king, and even some of the Hyksos collaborators in Egypt's southern regions began to waver in their loyalties. Ahmose-Nefertari's influence continued to be a stabilizing force throughout this period. While her son led his army in battle, she remained in Thebes, coordinating supplies and maintaining morale among the civilians and the army alike. Her letters, filled with wisdom and encouragement, were sent regularly to her son, reminding him of the long road they had traveled together and the sacrifices they had made. Her words were a source of strength to Ahmose I, who had never been alone in his struggle. Her presence was felt even in the heat of battle, and it gave him the resolve to press on despite the hardships. For weeks, the siege continued, and the Hyksos' resistance began to falter. Their food stores dwindled, their morale weakened, and their defenders grew weary. The once proud capital of Avaris, which had stood as a symbol of foreign strength for so many years, was slowly being strangled by the unrelenting pressure of the Egyptian forces. Ahmose I knew that the final assault was near. It would come at the moment when the Hyksos believed they had no hope left, and that moment arrived as the Egyptian army launched a full-scale attack on the city's gates. The battle for Avaris was fierce. The Hyksos defenders fought valiantly, determined not to surrender their last stronghold. The chariots of the Hyksos, which had once been the symbol of their military dominance, were now employed in desperate attempts to break through the Egyptian siege lines. But the Egyptians were well prepared, and the Theban reserves, led by Ahmose I himself, pushed forward with relentless precision. Every move had been planned, every contingency accounted for. The battle, though bloody, was swift. As the Egyptian forces breached the gates of Avaris, the city's fate was sealed. The Hyksos king, Apophis, realizing the inevitable, attempted to flee. But he was captured by Egyptian forces before he could escape. With the fall of Avaris, the Hyksos lost their grip on Egypt once and for all. The city was plundered, and the remnants of the Hyksos army scattered in disarray. The people of Egypt, long oppressed under the foreign rule, erupted in celebration, knowing that the long nightmare had come to an end. In the wake of the victory, Ahmose I entered Avaris in triumph, accompanied by his mother, Ahmose-Nefertari, who had been instrumental in guiding Egypt to this moment. Together, they stood at the heart of the city, gazing at the ruins of the Hyksos Empire. The battle for Egypt had been won, but it was also the beginning of a new era for the nation, a period of recovery, restoration, and renewal. The fall of Avaris marked not only the defeat of the Hyksos but also the dawn of Egypt's greatest period of prosperity. With the Hyksos gone, Ahmose I could now turn his attention to rebuilding the country and restoring its former glory. But he knew that this victory was not his alone. It was the result of the unbreakable bond between him and his mother, Ahmose-Nefertari, whose strength, wisdom, and leadership had guided him every step of the way. She was not just a queen or a mother, she was the heart of Egypt's resurgence. Together, Ahmose I and Ahmose-Nefertari had secured Egypt's future. The reign of the Hyksos was over, and the glory of the pharaohs would rise again, stronger than ever. The fall of Avaris marked the end of the Hyksos reign and the beginning of Egypt's long road to recovery. Ahmose I's victory was not just a military triumph, but a momentous event that signaled the return of Egypt to its rightful rulers. The Hyksos, who had occupied the northern territories for over a century, were vanquished, and Egypt's sovereignty was restored. But as the dust settled and the echoes of battle faded, the real work began. The victory was only the first step in the arduous task of rebuilding a fractured nation. Ahmose I, victorious but exhausted, knew that the road ahead would not be easy. The Hyksos had left Egypt in a state of disarray. Their occupation had ravaged the economy, disrupted trade, and fractured the social fabric of the nation. Egypt had been stripped of many of its resources, its temples desecrated, and its agricultural lands neglected. The war had left scars, both physical and psychological, and it was now up to Ahmose I, with the steadfast support of his mother, Ahmose-Nefertari, to restore Egypt to its former glory. Ahmose-Nefertari, ever the strategic thinker, immediately set to work on one of the most important tasks of the post-war era, ensuring that Egypt's internal unity remained intact. With the fall of the Hyksos, the various Egyptian factions, long divided by the occupation, needed to be brought back together. It was no small feat. Many of the nobles had been either coerced into collaboration with the Hyksos or had simply been too weak to resist. These men and women, though once loyal to the Egyptian crown, were now wary of the changes the war had brought. Ahmose-Nefertari's diplomatic skills were put to the test. She worked tirelessly to reintegrate these nobles into the new government, offering them positions of power in exchange for their loyalty. Her efforts were not just focused on the elite, however. She made sure that the common people of Egypt, who had borne the brunt of the war, were also included in the rebuilding process. The Egyptian army, having tasted victory, was loyal to their king, but it was the people who would help rebuild the infrastructure and economy of the country. Ahmose I's first order of business was to restore order in the northern regions, which had been devastated by the long years of occupation. The once great city of Avaris, now reduced to rubble, would need to be rebuilt from the ground up. But the destruction of Avaris was not seen as a symbol of defeat. It was a symbol of Egypt's resilience. Ahmose I saw the rebuilding of Avaris as a powerful statement to both the Egyptians and the world. Egypt would rise from the ashes, stronger than ever. The reconstruction effort was monumental. Temples, palaces, and administrative buildings had to be rebuilt or restored. The infrastructure of Egypt, particularly its vast network of irrigation channels that had been neglected during the war, needed urgent attention. Ahmose I, with the help of his trusted advisors and skilled architects, began the task of restoring Egypt's agricultural prosperity. He directed the restoration of the Nile's irrigation system, which was crucial to Egypt's economy, and re-established trade routes that had been disrupted during the Hyksos occupation. In this period of rebuilding, Ahmose-Nefertari's influence was felt in every corner of the kingdom. As the mother of the king, she held immense sway over the political and religious landscape of Egypt. The temples of Ammonius, which had been desecrated by the Hyksos, were among the first structures to be restored. Ahmose-Nefertari worked closely with the high priests of Ammonius to ensure that Egypt's religious traditions were not only maintained but elevated to new heights. The priesthood, which had always held a significant role in Egyptian society, was now one of the cornerstones of Egypt's resurgence. Under Ahmose I's reign, Egypt would undergo a spiritual renaissance, and Ahmose-Nefertari would be at the heart of that revival. In addition to religious and political reconstruction, the military had to be reorganized and strengthened. The army, which had been vital in securing Egypt's freedom, now faced the challenge of protecting the country from any future foreign threats. Ahmose I, recognizing the importance of a strong military, began the process of professionalizing the Egyptian army, ensuring that it was not only large but also well-trained and well-equipped. Ahmose-Nefertari played an important role in supporting this reform by ensuring that Egypt's resources were used wisely and that the army was provided with the necessary resources to maintain its strength. The restoration of Egypt's economy was equally crucial. The years of conflict had drained the country's wealth, and the agricultural sector, the backbone of Egypt's economy, had been neglected during the occupation. Ahmose I worked to revive agriculture, redistributing land and encouraging farmers to return to their fields. The construction of new irrigation systems was a priority, ensuring that the land could once again be cultivated to its full potential. However, rebuilding Egypt was not just about restoring infrastructure, it was about re-establishing the Egyptian identity. Ahmose I, with Ahmose-Nefertari by his side, understood that Egypt's true strength lay not only in its physical resources but in its cultural and spiritual heritage. As part of the rebuilding process, Ahmose I commissioned the construction of monuments and temples dedicated to the gods, particularly Ammonius, to show the world that Egypt had not been broken by foreign rule. Ahmose-Nefertari, as the queen, also participated in these religious projects, ensuring that the gods were honored and that Egypt's divine kingship was firmly reasserted. As Egypt's recovery continued, Ahmose I began to turn his attention to the broader goals of empire building. With the Hyksos defeated and the nation stabilized, he sought to expand Egypt's influence beyond its borders. The military campaigns of the past had been about survival. Now, the reign of Ahmose I would usher in an era of expansion. as Egypt sought to regain its status as the dominant power in the ancient world. For Ahmose-Nefertari, this period of reconstruction was a time of reflection and renewal. She had played a pivotal role in guiding her son to victory, but now her influence was needed to ensure that Egypt's future was secured. As a mother, queen, and advisor, she remained a steady hand in her son's court, helping him navigate the complexities of leadership. Together, they had defeated the Hyksos. But the future of Egypt would be shaped not only by their military victories but by the legacy they built for generations to come. In the wake of Egypt's liberation, as the dust settled on the battlefield and the hard work of rebuilding began, one figure remained at the center of the transformation: Ahmose-Nefertari, the queen mother, advisor, and the unyielding force behind her son's rule. She was not merely a passive figure in Egypt's political landscape, she was an active participant, a vital force in the administration and the spiritual renewal of the country. Her role as both mother to Ahmose I and as queen to the Egyptian people placed her in a unique position to influence not only the king but the very soul of Egypt itself. Ahmose I, having defeated the Hyksos and secured Egypt's independence, now faced the difficult task of stabilizing and expanding his kingdom. While his military and diplomatic efforts were essential to Egypt's revival, it was his mother, Ahmose-Nefertari, who helped him navigate the intricacies of governance. As the mother of the king, she held a special place not only in the royal court but also in the hearts of the Egyptian people. She was the symbol of continuity, of the eternal bond between Egypt's past and its future. Ahmose-Nefertari's role was multifaceted. As queen, she was responsible for overseeing the spiritual and religious renewal of Egypt. In a time of profound upheaval, it was essential for Egypt to re-establish its relationship with the gods, to restore the temples that had been defiled by the Hyksos, and to ensure that the divine order was upheld. Ahmose-Nefertari, with her deep understanding of Egypt's religious traditions, worked closely with the high priests of Ammonius to ensure that the temples were rebuilt and that the rituals were conducted properly. The restoration of these sacred spaces was not merely a matter of construction, it was a powerful symbol that Egypt had reclaimed its sovereignty, not just politically but spiritually as well. Her relationship with the priesthood was vital. The priests of Ammonius were immensely powerful figures in Egypt, and their support was crucial to the stability of the throne. Ahmose-Nefertari, understanding this, worked to solidify the bond between the royal family and the priesthood, ensuring that the religious elite were fully invested in her son's rule. The high priests of Ammonius, in turn, used their influence to bolster Ahmose I's position and helped ensure the peace and stability of Egypt. But Ahmose-Nefertari's influence was not limited to religious matters. As a mother, she provided guidance and counsel to her son, Ahmose I, in a way that no one else could. The trauma of losing his father, Ahmose-Nefertari, had left a lasting scar on Ahmose I, but his mother had always been there to offer solace, wisdom, and unwavering support. In the court of Thebes, her presence was a source of strength for her son, who relied heavily on her insight and experience. While Ahmose I was a powerful military leader, his mother's wisdom in matters of governance, diplomacy, and statecraft was indispensable. Ahmose-Nefertari's influence was felt not only in the royal court but also among the people of Egypt. As the mother of the king, she was seen as the mother of the nation. Her actions, her decisions, and her presence had a profound effect on the Egyptians, who viewed her as the embodiment of their hopes for a stable and prosperous future. In a society where family was at the heart of all things, Ahmose-Nefertari's role as the mother of Egypt's ruler was both symbolic and practical. With her support, Ahmose I embarked on his next phase of governance, ensuring the continued strength of Egypt's military. The Egyptian army had been critical in securing victory against the Hyksos, and Ahmose I knew that maintaining military strength was essential for the kingdom's future security. Yet, while he focused on military expansion and fortification, it was his mother who helped guide his approach to governance at home. She ensured that Egypt's military conquests were balanced with the needs of the people. The taxation system, the distribution of land, and the protection of Egypt's infrastructure were all managed with a careful hand under her watchful eye. Ahmose-Nefertari also played a key role in the expansion of Egypt's borders. With the Hyksos vanquished, Egypt turned its attention to neighboring territories, seeking to reclaim lost lands and extend its influence. Ahmose I launched military campaigns into Nubia and Syria, and these conquests further solidified Egypt's power in the ancient world. Throughout these campaigns, Ahmose-Nefertari provided counsel to her son, helping him navigate the complex politics of empire building. Her diplomatic skills ensured that Egypt's relations with newly conquered territories were balanced, preventing rebellion while also allowing the Egyptians to solidify their dominance. As a queen, Ahmose-Nefertari also took an active role in the cultural renaissance of Egypt. Under her guidance, Egypt began to emerge as a powerful center of art, literature, and philosophy. The creation of monumental statues, stelae, and temples flourished under her patronage. She was a patron of the arts, and her influence over the artistic community helped Egypt create a visual identity that would endure for centuries. The beauty of Egypt's temples, tombs, and sculptures reflected the strength and unity of the kingdom, and Ahmose-Nefertari's hand was evident in every corner of the artistic renaissance. Her role as a mother was also reflected in her approach to securing Egypt's future through her children. Ahmose I had a son, Amenhotep I, who would eventually succeed him on the throne. But Ahmose-Nefertari's role as the mother of the next generation of Egyptian rulers was far from ceremonial. She raised her son with the same sense of duty, discipline, and wisdom that had guided her own life. Her influence on Amenhotep I was profound, ensuring that the royal bloodline would continue the work that Ahmose I had begun. Through her careful guidance, Egypt's future was secured. Ahmose-Nefertari's legacy was not just one of motherhood and guidance. She was a queen who helped restore Egypt's greatness, both politically and culturally. She was a figure of stability and strength during a time of great upheaval, and her influence on both her son and the nation was immeasurable. Ahmose may first have been the warrior king who drove out the Hyksos, but it was his mother, Ahmose-Nefertari, who laid the foundations for the glory that would follow. In the years that followed, Egypt would enter into a period of unprecedented prosperity. Ahmose I's reign would be remembered as the beginning of the New Kingdom, a golden age in Egyptian history. And while Ahmose I would take the credit for the military victories, it was Ahmose-Nefertari who ensured that those victories were translated into lasting peace, prosperity, and cultural revival. After the fall of avarice and the defeat of the Hyksos, Egypt entered a period of consolidation. The victory over the foreign rulers was not merely a military triumph, but the beginning of a new era for Egypt, a new political order under the leadership of Ahmose I and his steadfast queen, Ahmose-Nefertari. Together, they forged a kingdom ready to recover from the ravages of war, to rebuild the economy, and to solidify Egypt's power both within its borders and abroad. It was during this period of consolidation that the foundations of Egypt's greatest empire were laid, the New Kingdom. Ahmose I knew that the restoration of Egypt's political unity required more than just military victories. The nation needed a system that could govern effectively, unify its people, and prevent any fragmentation that could once again invite foreign invaders. As the ruler of a newly unified Egypt, Ahmose I worked to solidify his control over the entire nation. His success in driving out the Hyksos not only restored Egyptian sovereignty but also made him the undisputed ruler of Egypt. Yet, as powerful as he was, Ahmose I understood that the success of his reign depended on a careful balance of power and the maintenance of internal stability. At the heart of this consolidation was Ahmose-Nefertari's influence. As queen, she was deeply involved in the political affairs of the kingdom. Her experience in diplomacy, her understanding of the religious traditions of Egypt, and her ability to connect with both the elite and the common people made her an invaluable advisor to Ahmose I. She played a key role in shaping the governance of the kingdom, particularly in ensuring the support of the priesthood, the military, and the nobility. The priests of Ammonius, based in Thebes, were crucial to the political consolidation of the new kingdom. The high priests of Ammonius were not only religious leaders but also political figures of great power, wielding influence over the people and the royal court. Ahmose I and Ahmose-Nefertari knew that the support of the priesthood was essential for the stability of the new dynasty. Ahmose-Nefertari, with her political acumen, worked closely with the priests to secure their loyalty. In return, the high priests granted Ahmose I the divine legitimacy that was necessary for his rule. This relationship between the monarchy and the priesthood would define the political landscape of the new kingdom and ensure that Egypt's kings were seen as divinely chosen. the role of religion in Egyptian society could not be overstated. Ahmose I's reign marked the beginning of a new religious order in Egypt, one that centered around the worship of Ammonius and the revitalization of the Theban religious traditions. Under Ahmose I's rule, temples to Ammonius were rebuilt and new ones were constructed, ensuring that Egypt's divine favor would be secured for generations to come. Ahmose-Nefertari, as the queen, was actively involved in these religious reforms. She understood the power of religion in unifying the people and legitimizing the royal family's rule. As both a mother and a queen, she was seen as a living symbol of the divine order, an embodiment of the goddess Hathor, who was associated with love, motherhood, and fertility. The relationship between Ahmose I and Ahmose-Nefertari also extended to the military, which had played a pivotal role in the defeat of the Hyksos. Ahmose I recognized that Egypt's newfound power would require a military that was not only loyal but also modern and professional. The Egyptian army had long been a powerful force, but the demands of the new kingdom required an even more sophisticated structure. Ahmose I began to reorganize and professionalize the military, creating elite units that would serve as the core of Egypt's imperial ambitions. These reforms were essential for maintaining the security of Egypt's borders and ensuring that Egypt would be able to project its power throughout the ancient world. Ahmose-Nefertari, in her role as queen, was instrumental in ensuring that Egypt's military campaigns had the necessary resources and support. She helped to manage Egypt's wealth, ensuring that the kingdom could fund its military expeditions and its monumental building projects. The royal court under Ahmose I and Ahmose-Nefertari became a center of power, where military leaders, priests, and nobles gathered to shape the future of Egypt. As Egypt's borders began to expand, the process of consolidation extended beyond the Nile Valley. Ahmose I launched military campaigns into Nubia, Syria, and Canaan, territories that had been lost during the previous centuries of turmoil. These regions were critical to Egypt's control over the trade routes that connected the Mediterranean world with the African interior. By securing these territories, Ahmose I not only ensured the stability of Egypt's borders but also laid the groundwork for the empire's prosperity. Ahmose-Nefertari, too, played a role in these expansions. Her diplomatic skills were instrumental in securing the loyalty of the newly conquered territories. Through alliances, marriage contracts, and treaties, Ahmose-Nefertari ensured that Egypt's relationships with these regions remained stable. Her ability to navigate the complex politics of the ancient Near East allowed Egypt to expand without facing constant rebellion or resistance from its newly acquired subjects. With the political and military consolidation underway, the final aspect of Egypt's recovery was its cultural revival. The new kingdom saw the rise of Egypt as a cultural powerhouse in the ancient world. The arts, literature, and monumental architecture flourished under the patronage of Ahmose I and Ahmose-Nefertari. The construction of grand temples, tombs, and statues, particularly those dedicated to Ammonius and other gods, was a testament to the wealth and power of the new kingdom. This period also saw the development of the famous Valley of the Kings, where pharaohs and nobles would later be buried in elaborate tombs, ensuring their immortality. Ahmose-Nefertari, as a queen, played a key role in the cultural and artistic renaissance of Egypt. Her likeness was immortalized in statues and paintings, often depicted alongside her husband, Ahmose I. These artistic representations helped to cement her legacy as one of the most important and influential queens in Egyptian history. Her involvement in the arts and her role as a patron of Egyptian culture ensured that her influence would be felt long after her death. By the end of Ahmose I's reign, Egypt had undergone a profound transformation. The political and religious consolidation of the 18th dynasty had established Egypt as a dominant force in the ancient world. The military, under Ahmose I's reforms, was ready to defend the kingdom and expand its borders. The economy, rejuvenated through the conquest of key territories and the restoration of trade routes, was flourishing. And culturally, Egypt was once again a beacon of civilization, its art, architecture, and literature admired throughout the ancient world. The legacy of Ahmose-Nefertari, the queen who had helped her son navigate the tumultuous waters of war, diplomacy, and governance, was firmly cemented in Egypt's history. Her role in the consolidation of the 18th dynasty was pivotal. Without her, Egypt's resurgence would not have been possible. Together with Ahmose I, She had ensured that Egypt would rise to its greatest heights, becoming the empire that would rule over the ancient world for centuries to come. With Egypt firmly re-established as a dominant force in the ancient world, the reign of Ahmose I marked the dawn of the new kingdom. His victories over the Hyksos, his consolidation of political and military power, and his restoration of Egypt's religious practices had paved the way for future generations of pharaohs to build upon. As Ahmose I began to show signs of aging, the focus of Egypt's leadership shifted toward the next generation, the future of the dynasty that had been so carefully nurtured by Ahmose-Nefertari, his queen and mother of the heir to the throne. The transition from Ahmose I to his successor, Amenhotep I, was not simply a political change, it was a symbolic passage of power that carried with it the weight of Egypt's glorious past and the promise of an even brighter future. Amenhotep I, the son of Ahmose I and Ahmose-Nefertari, was groomed from birth to follow in his father's footsteps. But his ascension to the throne marked the beginning of an era defined by the consolidation of Egypt's imperial might and a flourishing of Egypt's culture, diplomacy, and power. As a child, Amenhotep I was steeped in the ideals of his parents. He grew up in the shadow of his father's military conquests, learning the arts of war and diplomacy from Ahmose I, who ensured his son was ready to carry the mantle of leadership. But it was Ahmose-Nefertari, with her wisdom and deep understanding of Egypt's political and spiritual needs, who played the most pivotal role in his early education. She had seen Egypt through its darkest times and was determined to ensure that her son would inherit a kingdom poised for greatness. The coronation of Amenhotep I marked the formal continuation of the 18th dynasty, and his ascent to the throne was celebrated across Egypt. It was clear to all that the royal bloodline was secure, and with the legacy of his parents as his foundation, Amenhotep I was set to lead Egypt into its golden age. His reign, though relatively short, would prove transformative, with his administrative reforms and focus on religious devotion leaving a lasting impact on the nation. Ahmose-Nefertari, while no longer the queen consort, continued to wield significant influence in the court as the queen mother. Her wisdom was invaluable, particularly in the early years of Amenhotep I's reign. The queen mother's guidance was not only a source of strength for her son, but also for the entire nation, as she ensured that Egypt's policies and religious practices remained rooted in the traditions her husband and she had fought so hard to restore. Her presence in the royal court was a stabilizing force, particularly as Amenhotep I sought to establish his own identity as pharaoh. Ahmose-Nefertari's influence extended far beyond her son's reign. She was revered as a goddess in her own right, a figure who symbolized both motherhood and divine kingship. During her life, Ahmose-Nefertari was regarded as a living embodiment of the goddess Hathor, and upon her death, she was deified, her memory preserved in temples and monuments across Egypt. She was not only the mother of Egypt's savior king but also a protector of its future, and her legacy would continue to shape the nation long after her passing. For Amenhotep I, the guidance of his mother was crucial as he navigated the early years of his reign. While Ahmose I had been a warrior king, Amenhotep I was more of a diplomat, focused on internal consolidation and the enhancement of Egypt's prestige through peaceful means. He oversaw the construction of temples and monuments dedicated to Ammonius, reinforcing Egypt's connection to its gods and strengthening its religious and political identity. Under Amenhotep I's leadership, Egypt continued to prosper. The administrative reforms implemented by his father were expanded, ensuring that Egypt's military and economy remained strong. The territories conquered by Ahmose I were maintained, and Egypt's influence in the ancient world continued to grow. However, unlike his father, Amenhotep I did not pursue large-scale military expansion. Instead, he focused on strengthening Egypt's position as a cultural and religious beacon, solidifying its reputation as a center of art, learning, and spirituality. One of the most significant aspects of Amenhotep I's reign was the focus on religion. Under his rule, Egypt experienced a renaissance in religious devotion, particularly in the worship of Ammonius. The king's relationship with the priesthood was solidified, and Egypt's temples were restored and expanded. The high priests of Ammonius were elevated to new heights, and their influence reached its zenith during his reign. The restoration of the temples and the construction of magnificent monuments dedicated to the gods served as symbols of Egypt's divine legitimacy and its continued favor with the gods. Ahmose-Nefertari's legacy was intricately woven into this religious revival. Her role in nurturing Egypt's relationship with the divine, through her close ties with the priesthood and her devotion to the gods, laid the groundwork for the flourishing of Egypt's religious institutions. As the Queen Mother, she ensured that her son's reign would be one that honored the gods and upheld Egypt's ancient traditions. She had, in many ways, become the spiritual mother of Egypt, her influence far-reaching and her memory immortalized. Her tomb, though not discovered until long after her death, stands as a testament to her importance in Egypt's history. The grandeur of her burial reflects her status as one of Egypt's greatest queens, and the monuments built in her honor by her son ensured that her legacy would be passed down through the generations. As Amenhotep I continued to build upon the work of his father, Ahmose-Nefertari remained a quiet but powerful presence in the royal court. Her counsel was sought on matters of state and religion, and her influence remained felt throughout Egypt. She was not just a queen mother. She was a queen of Egypt's heart and soul, a figure who had guided the nation through its darkest days and into an era of unprecedented prosperity. Even in death, Ahmose-Nefertari's legacy was firmly entrenched in the fabric of Egypt's future. The dynasty she had helped to create, through her wisdom, her strength, and her unwavering dedication to her country, would continue to rule Egypt for centuries. The 18th dynasty, which began with the victory over the Hyksos and the restoration of Egypt's power, would become one of the most glorious periods in Egypt's history. And it was Ahmose-Nefertari's legacy as mother, queen, and guide that ensured Egypt would remain strong, united, and prosperous for generations to come. Ahmose-Nefertari's reign as queen and her role as the guiding force behind Egypt's restoration and consolidation is an enduring legacy. But it was her death that would truly cement her place as one of the greatest figures in Egyptian history. The passage from life to death was a natural part of the cycle of Egyptian kingship, and the transition was a moment for Egypt to reflect on all that Ahmose-Nefertari had contributed to the kingdom. Her death marked not only the loss of a mother, a queen, and a symbol of strength, but also the rise of her deified legacy which would influence generations to come. Ahmose-Nefertari's tomb, as one of the most elaborate in ancient Egypt, became an enduring symbol of her status not only as a royal consort but as a divine mother and queen. Though her tomb was not discovered until centuries after her death, it was clear that she had been accorded a reverence akin to that of the gods themselves. The tomb itself was a reflection of her monumental influence on Egypt's culture, religion, and political landscape, and it held treasures and inscriptions that told the story of her life and her unparalleled importance to the Egyptian people. When Ahmose-Nefertari passed, Egypt was already flourishing under the rule of her son, Amenhotep I. Yet, her death created a profound moment of mourning for the Egyptian people, who had come to see her not only as the Queen of Egypt but as a living embodiment of the divine order. Her image, crafted in statues, carvings, and inscriptions, immortalized her as a goddess. She had not merely been a queen consort. She had been a protector of Egypt, a mother to its future pharaohs, and a key player in the resurgence of the new kingdom. The tomb built for Ahmose-Nefertari in Thebes was grand in both its scope and its symbolism. As a queen of Egypt, she was buried in a royal tomb, a space that symbolized both her station in life and her journey to the afterlife. The layout and design of her tomb were intended not only to honor her life but also to secure her place among the gods. Egypt's belief in life after death was deep-rooted, and the tomb of a queen like Ahmose-Nefertari was designed to ensure her safe passage into the next world. Her tomb was adorned with numerous inscriptions that illustrated her life, her influence, and her role in shaping Egypt's future. These inscriptions were not merely political records, they were religious declarations of her divine status. The queen was depicted in scenes that showed her as a mediator between the gods and the people, ensuring Egypt's prosperity through her association with the divine. She was revered as a goddess herself, an intermediary who helped sustain Egypt's kingship, its religious traditions, and its military strength. One of the most powerful images in her tomb was that of Ahmose-Nefertari sitting beside the gods, especially Ammonius, the king of the gods. This reflected her deified status and her integral role in Egypt's divine kingship. She had been an active participant in Egypt's religious life during her reign, ensuring that the gods were worshipped and that Egypt's kingship was legitimized by the divine. Even after her death, she was seen as a protector of Egypt, offering a divine blessing on future generations of pharaohs. The tomb also featured inscriptions of prayers and invocations asking for blessings for her son, Amenhotep I, and for the prosperity of Egypt. Ahmose-Nefertari's continued influence over the kingdom, even in death, was palpable. The tomb served not only as a place of rest for the queen, but as a spiritual anchor for Egypt itself. It was a reminder that she had, in many ways, been the heart of Egypt's restoration, the steady hand that had guided the kingdom through its most challenging times. Her tomb and the rites associated with her burial were not only a royal ceremony but also a statement of Egypt's understanding of kingship. In the eyes of the Egyptian people, she had been not just the queen of the living but also a queen of the dead, a woman who continued to protect and bless Egypt from the afterlife. The deification of Ahmose-Nefertari underscored the deep connection between Egypt's political and religious spheres, where kings and queens were seen not only as rulers but as intermediaries between the human world and the divine. Ahmose-Nefertari's posthumous deification was further commemorated by monuments that were erected in her honor throughout Egypt. Statues of her were placed in temples dedicated to Ammonius and other gods where she was honored as a mother goddess. Her name lived on through these monuments, and her image became one of divine motherhood, an archetype that resonated deeply with the people of Egypt. As the years passed, the legacy of Ahmose-Nefertari continued to shape Egypt, both politically and spiritually. Her son, Amenhotep I, who had been raised and guided by her, honored her memory throughout his reign. He built temples and monuments in her name, ensuring that her legacy remained a guiding light for Egypt. He recognized that his mother had been instrumental not only in his own rise to power but in the consolidation of the new kingdom. It was through her leadership and vision that Egypt had been able to restore its place in the ancient world. Ahmose-Nefertari's legacy also influenced future generations of queens. As the first great queen mother of the new kingdom, she set a precedent for the role of women in Egyptian governance. Her strength, her wisdom, and her ability to shape the course of Egyptian history made her an ideal model for subsequent queens who sought to emulate her success in both political and religious realms. Even after Egypt's new kingdom came to an end, Ahmose-Nefertari's memory persisted. Her tomb remained an important site for religious and royal rituals. As the centuries passed, she became a symbol of divine motherhood, a queen who had bridged the mortal and divine realms to protect and elevate Egypt. The reign of Ahmose I had ushered in an era of prosperity and revival for Egypt, but it was the legacy of Ahmose-Nefertari that would continue to resonate through the new kingdom. As both a queen and a mother, her influence had permeated every corner of Egyptian society, politically, religiously, and culturally. After her death and deification, her impact on Egypt's history remained profound, shaping the course of the 18th dynasty and beyond. Her legacy was not simply that of a ruler's consort, she was a beacon of divine kingship, a matriarch who had helped define Egypt's golden age. Ahmose-Nefertari's influence over the early New Kingdom was particularly evident in the reigns of her son, Amenhotep I, and his successors. Though Amenhotep I was a more reserved and diplomatic ruler, his mother's legacy continued to guide him. She had been the pillar of strength during the difficult years of Egypt's liberation, and her wisdom helped him navigate the complex realities of governance. Her role in shaping his character and vision for Egypt was undeniable. The care with which Amenhotep I governed Egypt, ensuring stability and peace, was a direct reflection of the lessons he had learned from her. Ahmose-Nefertari's religious influence also endured throughout the New Kingdom. Her dedication to the gods, particularly Ammonius, had played a significant role in ensuring Egypt's continued divine favor. She had ensured that Egypt's temples were restored and that the gods were honored with the devotion they deserved. Her association with Ammonius, as both a queen and a divine figure, elevated her status and made her an important part of Egypt's religious identity. Her relationship with the high priests of Ammonius had created a powerful bond between the monarchy and the religious elite. This relationship was continued by her son, Amenhotep I, who carried on her policy of fostering a strong connection between the royal family and the priests. This collaboration ensured that Egypt's religious institutions remained powerful and influential, and it also helped secure the stability of the 18th dynasty. Ahmose-Nefertari's legacy was also reflected in the political structure of Egypt during the New Kingdom. As the first queen mother of the dynasty, she had established a model for future queens and royal women. Her ability to wield political power not just as a consort but as a co-regent set a precedent for later queens such as Hatshepsut, Nefertiti, and Tai. These queens, each in their own way, followed the example set by Ahmose-Nefertari, balancing the roles of mother, advisor, and sovereign figure. Moreover, Ahmose-Nefertari's influence extended beyond the court and into the military. The army, which had been crucial to Egypt's victory over the Hyksos, continued to play a key role in the country's expansion and defense. During the reign of Amenhotep I and his successors, Egypt launched several military campaigns to extend its borders, particularly in Nubia and the Levant. These campaigns helped secure Egypt's control over important trade routes and territories, ensuring that the wealth of the nation would continue to flow. The military was also heavily involved in Egypt's building projects, with soldiers often doubling as laborers in the construction of temples, monuments, and royal tombs. The sense of unity between the military, the crown, and the religious elite was a testament to Ahmose-Nefertari's enduring influence on the nation. In addition to her political and military legacy, Ahmose-Nefertari's impact on Egyptian culture cannot be overstated. As a queen and a mother, she was celebrated in art, literature, and religious texts. Her image was depicted in statues, reliefs, and paintings, often shown in the company of her husband, Ahmose I, and her son, Amenhotep I. These artistic representations served not only to honor her but also to reinforce the divine right of kingship in Egypt, with Ahmose-Nefertari acting as a symbol of the unity between the gods, the pharaohs, and the people. The preservation of her memory through monuments and art was a key component of her legacy. Statues of Ahmose-Nefertari were placed in temples across Egypt, ensuring that her image would continue to inspire future generations. These monuments were not only a way to honor the queen but also to remind the people of Egypt of the strength and unity that had been achieved through her leadership. Her image was inseparable from Egypt's resurgence, and her legacy was entwined with the very fabric of Egyptian identity. As the 18th dynasty continued to thrive, the influence of Ahmose-Nefertari lived on in the policies and actions of her descendants. Hatshepsut, one of the most famous female pharaohs, would follow in her footsteps, using her position as queen to establish her own authority as pharaoh. Hatshepsut, like Ahmose-Nefertari, was not merely a consort but a ruler in her own right. Her reign was marked by peace, prosperity, and the building of monumental structures, much like the achievements of Ahmose I and Ahmose-Nefertari. Nefertiti, the wife of Akhenaten, would also draw upon the legacy of Ahmose-Nefertari, using her position as queen to support her husband's religious reforms and to maintain Egypt's political stability. Nefertiti's powerful image, preserved in numerous statues and portraits, reflected the same sense of divine kingship that had been embodied by Ahmose-Nefertari. She, too, would come to be regarded as a symbol of strength and beauty, much like the queen who had established the foundation for the New Kingdom. Ahmose-Nefertari's legacy also had a lasting impact on the religious life of Egypt. She was remembered as a protector of Egypt's divine order, and her deification ensured that she would be worshipped as a goddess long after her death. Temples were built in her honor, and her name was invoked in religious ceremonies and royal inscriptions. She became a figure of divine motherhood, a symbol of the nurturing force that sustained Egypt's kingship. Her legacy as a divine queen mother lived on in the hearts and minds of the Egyptian people, transcending the boundaries of time and space. In death, Ahmose-Nefertari became more than just a queen. She was a symbol of Egypt's renewal, a goddess who bridged the gap between the mortal and divine worlds. Her life and reign, marked by strength, wisdom, and devotion, were immortalized in the tombs, statues, and monuments that honored her. Even as Egypt's power and influence waned in later centuries, the legacy of Ahmose-Nefertari continued to be felt. She had been a guiding force in Egypt's revival, and her memory would be cherished for millennia. The history of ancient Egypt is filled with the names of powerful pharaohs and queens, each leaving their mark upon the land they ruled. Yet, few figures are as enduringly significant as Ahmose-Nefertari, whose life and legacy not only shaped the course of Egypt's 18th dynasty but also ensured that the land of the pharaohs would experience one of its most glorious and prosperous ages. Her influence, both as a queen and as a mother, extended far beyond her reign, reverberating through the centuries, touching every aspect of Egypt's religious, political, and cultural identity. From her early days as the wife of Ahmose I, a king who liberated Egypt from the clutches of the Hyksos, to her role as the mother of Amenhotep I, her legacy was a cornerstone of Egypt's rebirth. As the queen mother, Ahmose-Nefertari bridged the gap between the past and the future, ensuring that her son's rule would be marked by wisdom, stability, and prosperity. Her understanding of Egypt's religious traditions, her diplomatic acumen, and her strategic insight made her one of the most powerful and respected figures in Egypt's history. Ahmose-Nefertari's most lasting impact was her role in the religious and cultural consolidation of the new kingdom. As a key figure in the restoration of Egypt's temples and the reassertion of divine kingship, she ensured that Egypt's spiritual traditions were firmly rooted in the foundations of the past. The deep connection between the pharaoh and the gods which she championed allowed Egypt's rulers to maintain their divine legitimacy and authority, a principle that would endure for centuries. Through her efforts, the worship of Ammonius, the god of Thebes, was strengthened, and Egypt's priesthood became an integral part of the kingdom's political and religious life. Her tomb, with its magnificent inscriptions and depictions of her as a divine mediator between the gods and the people, underscored her status as more than a mere mortal. She became a symbol of divine motherhood, the protector of Egypt's kingship, and a goddess in her own right. In death as in life, Ahmose-Nefertari continued to guide and protect Egypt, her legacy enshrined in the monuments and prayers that invoked her divine protection. Even after her passing, Ahmose-Nefertari's memory endured. Her son, Amenhotep I, would build upon the foundations she had helped lay, ensuring Egypt's prosperity and stability during his reign. His reign, marked by internal peace and the consolidation of Egypt's borders, was a direct continuation of the vision and legacy that Ahmose-Nefertari had instilled in him. Amenhotep I's reign was not one of military conquest as his father's had been, but one of religious devotion and cultural renaissance, a reflection of his mother's guiding influence. Through the centuries, Ahmose-Nefertari's legacy became intertwined with the very identity of Egypt. She was remembered not only as a queen who had fought to restore Egypt's sovereignty but as a symbol of the strength, wisdom, and divine authority that characterized the greatest rulers of the ancient world. The deification of Ahmose-Nefertari, along with the monuments and statues dedicated to her, ensured that her influence would be felt long after her death. The Egyptians regarded her as a protector of the nation, a divine mother who had guided the country to greatness and who continued to watch over it even in the afterlife. Her legacy was also carried forward by the queens who came after her. Hatshepsut, Nefertiti, and Tai, each one of Egypt's great queens, would take inspiration from the example set by Ahmose-Nefertari. They, too, would play pivotal roles in the governance of Egypt, wielding power not only as wives and mothers but as rulers in their own right. Like Ahmose-Nefertari, these queens understood the delicate balance of political power, diplomacy, and divine legitimacy. They knew that Egypt's strength lay not only in its military might but in the unity of its people, its connection to the divine, and the ability of its rulers to govern wisely and justly. Ahmose-Nefertari's legacy also endured through the centuries of Egypt's greatness. The 18th dynasty, which she helped secure, would come to be known as one of Egypt's most powerful and prosperous periods. Egypt's borders expanded, its wealth increased, and its influence over the ancient world reached its peak. The reigns of her descendants, Thutmose III, Amenhotep I, II, Akhenaten, and Ramses II, would be marked by extraordinary achievements in art, architecture, and diplomacy. And though Ahmose-Nefertari was no longer physically present, her spirit continued to guide the course of Egypt's destiny. In the end, Ahmose-Nefertari was not just a queen, nor simply a mother of a king. She was the embodiment of Egypt's divine kingship, a protector of its sovereignty, and a symbol of the eternal connection between the gods and the pharaohs. Her influence shaped the course of Egyptian history for centuries, and her legacy is woven into the very fabric of Egypt's civilization. Her name is immortalized in the inscriptions and monuments that still stand today, reminders of a queen who was both a ruler and a divine force in the land of the pharaohs. Ahmose-Nefertari's story is one of resilience, power, and devotion. She was a queen who helped bring Egypt back from the brink of destruction. A mother who shaped the destiny of her son and of Egypt itself. Her legacy is timeless, and her influence is still felt in the monuments, temples, and statues that continue to inspire awe. She remains a testament to the strength and greatness of Egypt, and her name will forever be associated with one of the most glorious periods in history.